Welcome everybody again. Those of you who are here in person, so to speak, and also those of you who are watching this video online after the fact. I was just flicking through all the people that have come. It's a real privilege that you would offer your time to listen to me and Chiara do these sessions, and we're really enjoying them. It's just to say Chiara's sadly had a family bereavement, so it's just going to be me tonight, I'm afraid. So this session 4, is designing an engagement strategy. And this is, I guess this is part of the meat, the bread and butter of what we need to be doing with our local place plan. In the sense that it's ultimately what we're trying to do is listen to the community. And so the way that we put together our engagement strategies and the way that we put together the work that we do in that sense is right at the very heart of getting good outcomes for our plan. So it's just me here tonight from Place at the Table. I work with Chiara Fingland and Ellie Burrows from Imagine If. We at Place at the Table, project management, facilitation policy, writing draft plans, coding data, training, mentoring, mediation. We do all these things. You can get in touch with us direct. Our details at the end of the session on the slides. And Chiara and Ellie at Imagine If, we do a lot of work together, but they are also local place plan consultants, community engagement, developing site briefs, facilitation. They're also really good. They're architects by training at co-housing and thinking about creative housing opportunities. And they can do workshop delivery and project coordination as well. So just get in touch if you need to. Now then, we're on the 4th training session. So this is the 5th of March. We've been through the 2 introductory sessions. And last week we looked at project managing our local place plan. So this is, we're trying to just put all this together in a way that would make sense to anyone dipping into these videos and to you all who are following, just in terms of following the overall process, which looks a bit like this as we conceive it, as we think about it, a 6-step journey. Last week, we covered stages 1, foundations, and stages 4 to 6, developing the draft plan, the information notice period, and submitting your plan. But stages 2 and 3, we thought warranted a couple of full sessions. This week is looking at engagement, and next week is looking at analysing our data. So this week, questions you may have about engagement and developing a strategy. How much engagement is enough? What is the minimum required engagement for a local place plan? How do we reach folks in the community who aren't the usual voices? A perennial question. What formats can be helpful for workshops? How do we go about designing them to meet everyone's needs and to encourage good interaction? And what kinds of information do we need to gather anyway? So we're, unfortunately, it's a bit of a whistle stop. All of these topics every week we can go a lot deeper into, but anyway, we're sharing tips from our own practice for you guys to make it, to be as practical as possible. But ultimately, there are quite a lot of ways, lots of different ways, in fact, particularly this section, to skin the cat, so to speak. So just steal what works for you. And change what doesn't. I'm sure you will all have the nous to be able to adapt your approach to what your local gifts are, to what the local needs of your community are, to the time and resources you have. Anyway, what is the minimum consultation required? We did cover this briefly before, but I thought it was worth putting this right at the beginning. The answer is, if you read the documents and the guidance, the answer is none. There's no minimum level of consultation required to develop your local place plan. You might be thinking, well, that's crazy. Of course, you need to be able to have a level of consultation to evidence where you've got all your ideas from. But the thinking here was that the Scottish Government, ultimately, they didn't want to put a target or a framework around this of expectation, because they knew that community groups have lots of creativity. There's lots of different ways to do engagement. And so they deliberately didn't put a minimum requirement. And also, unlike the system in England, where they call these plans neighbourhood plans, as you know, a local place plan, it doesn't end up in a vote across the whole community that has like a win-lose vote to elevate the document to a statutory document. That's what happens in England, and it's quite divisive. In Scotland, we don't have that. So it's not so crucial that there be a minimum level of consultation required. But what the government did say was, what we want you to do and we expect you to do when you submit the plan to the local authority is part of the validation criteria, the hoops or tick list you need to comply with, is you need to lay out a statement of community support. So they're not saying you need to do this level of engagement. They're saying you need to evidence what engagement you have done. And I like to think positively that that's because they trust you all, they trust us all. They know that developing a mandate and evidencing support within the community is important to us, regardless of whether we're submitting a local place plan, regardless of that process of validation. Every community I've been to that have been working on these things are desperate to get more involvement, not less. And it's just a question of how much resources we have. So we're going to have to, the idea is that you would submit the community's body view of the level and nature of support for the local place plan and the basis on which it has reached that view with an evidence base. And the invitation is, if concerns or different opinions from the community are raised during the engagement process, the community body may wish to show how it has tried to resolve these. That's up to you. But remember that ultimately the community body that you are representing has to take a position. That's expected. You're a representative body. You can't not take a position on different proposals, even if there's disagreement within your community. So what we like to do is submit comments that disagree. We have a sheet at the end where we put in all the comments that people have made that actually might disagree with our position, for transparency's sake to the community, but also to pass that up to the arbiter, the local authority, to make the final decision, which is what happens with local place plans. So the key thing is this idea of mandates. So I just say, well, how much community engagement is required? As much as you can manage with the resources you have, to the level of reassurance that you would have within yourselves that if one of your neighbours grabbed you 5 minutes, in 2 or 3 years' time, and said, well, where did you get these ideas from? What did you all do to establish that this was a community view? That you would be able to say, meeting them in the street, well, this is what we did, and this is how we did it, and we did the best we could with the resources we had. That's how we discovered a mandate. So hopefully that just gives you some reassurance as to the variety of options that are available, but also what you have to comply with around engagement. Anyway, before we get started, I just want to stress that thinking about connecting with people is quite simple, ultimately. It can feel, we're going to go into a bit of complexity, inevitably, but ultimately I like to think of this phase as listening well to interesting people about stuff that matters. And if we can do that with integrity, then we've done well. If we can listen well, meaning really understand where folks are coming from and give them the space to share, and then sift out the stuff that really matters, we've done our job. Okay, first of all, in terms of connecting with people, we need to communicate with them that there are opportunities for them to connect with us, or where we're going to them. So marketing is really important. We talked about this in the last session, but I'll just briefly focus on this. So when you're running a process, we want to try and create a process that is transparent, where people can understand from the beginning, if at all possible, what's going on and how to get involved and find out more information. So the initial foundation period lays out you should be trying to think of a marketing strategy, if you like. And here's the top tips that we have leading up to the beginning of your process. And the process really launches when you start in some way connecting with the community formally around gathering information, data, and stories. So what we do is we're just doing this in Mucket right now. So we've set a launch date a few weeks ahead. So that for us in Mucket is the 29th of March. So we've got a few weeks to work towards that. Then we get the marketing together. We've set up a one-stop shop web page on an existing community site, the mucketcommunity.org, which will use that one URL to put into all our marketing and have a QR code for that for people to easily click through at any time to find out anything they need to know. And they just need to know one URL for that. Very easy to do if you've got a community website, just add a page. Then we try and create a one-page A4 sheet, just explaining what a local place plan is, what we're doing, who we are, how to get in touch with us. So that can be downloaded from the website or possibly printed off and sent around people's homes. These are all very free, very cheap, easy things to do to maximize communication. We also like to set up an email. None of this is required. This is just ideas and it's all dependent on resources, but we like to set up a Google form for people to drop their email addresses in so that we've got a list of people that really want to hear us for direct, regular updates. That's really good for marketing to the people who want to hear about it. And then we just try and do as much relational kind of gossiping of what's happening or will be happening at the beginning. Then go out to local social media, just use your own local existing social media channels. There's no point redoing it all or having a new page necessarily on Twitter or wherever you might go, Facebook. Just use the existing feeds that exist that people have signed up to. And then you might want to, if you can and you've got time, this is much easier for smaller communities. You might get the chance working with other local volunteers, maybe dog walkers, to pop a leaflet into every home to give everyone the opportunity to know what's going on. And then on the launch day, so on the 29th, we're not only inviting the whole community through general marketing, we're specifically asking 20 to 30 key community leaders, maybe the councillors, maybe some local landowners, to come to that day and meet us, and we'll explain to them in person what's going on. So these are relatively straightforward things to do. And then on the launch day, that's when we would do an online survey, which I'll come to in a minute. As we move forward, though, when you're thinking about an engagement strategy, if you've used the local place plan project management tool, there are certain sections. This is from Planning Aid Scotland. You can download it from their resources page. I helped to write it. You can this is where it becomes really helpful to go back and start using some of the sections in this management tool that you've written up to know who to go to think about the key dates in the community that already exist, all that you can maybe connect with people easily because they're already gathered, maybe a gala day or whatnot, and start weaving all of this information that you've planned ahead around into your strategy. So I think of the engagement strategy as two stages. That's what I do. I think of it as diagnosing and then focusing down. What do I mean by that? Okay, first step, diagnosis. The first phase, I like to think of it as going wide to the many, in as straightforward a way as possible. And so in this phase, I quite like to use an online survey tool called PlaceCheck, which is, you can see the charges in the top right-hand corner. You can go to their website, placecheck.info. If you are a community council or neighbourhood organisation, community group, you can access this for free. You can email them. They're based in England, and they'll set up a PlaceCheck for you, which is essentially a web URL for your place, which opens up, hopefully this will work, a map with the opportunity for people to drop pins in. Now, there's a few extras that you can add, like you can pay a bit more to get a boundary around your place. You can ask them to define that. But this is the PlaceCheck for Balfron that we just ran a couple of months ago. As you can see, that you go to the URL, placecheck.info/app/map/Balfron, and essentially people sign up and log in. Hopefully this is going to work. maybe it's not. Usually that should populate itself. But essentially they log in, people log in, and then they can drop 3 different types of pins anywhere in your area. Things that they like, dislike, and would like to see changed. So the very simple open questions. PlaceCheck can be accessed very easily from your phone, not just from a computer screen. Another optional upgrade is you can allow people to pay a bit more and people can upload photos of exactly what they're talking about. Now, the benefit of this is that for a local place plan, the big question is where. Where are we talking about? So instead of a Google form where people might have to type in and explain what they're talking about, in PlaceCheck they can just drop a pin. Now, what then happens is you might run that for 2 to 3 weeks and you publicize it across your community. And then at the end, you close it down, you give people a clear definition of when it's going to end. And then you get a spreadsheet that gets put out at the back end in Excel. And the company PlaceCheck will just send this to you when you ask for it. And it comes out looking a bit like this. So what category of question? What actually is it that people are describing? The section where people are explaining, well, why have I even added it? You can, any particular pin, other people can upvote or downvote it, depending on whether they agree with it or not. And then you also get the latitude and longitude data. Well, what's exciting about that is, or really helpful, so I'm just opening up the spreadsheet that I was given. It's very easy then to for each comment, go back into Google Maps because they give you the longitude and latitude. So you can click and go, oh, well, where was that specific comment? And you can just find it again on Google Maps for later assessment and thinking, which is gold dust for a local place plan because the where is so important. And what you do is, although I've got a couple of URLs there, you grab the longitude and latitude, you go into Google Maps, you paste it into Google Maps, you hit return, and there we go. That is where the comment was related to. So you can go back to the mapping in a very precise way. So have a think about PlaceCheck. What that creates is an initial data set of all the things that actually concern your community. You're not making any assumptions. You're starting with a blank canvas, so to speak, and you're testing where people are actually at right now in a very open-handed way. And you're going to be able to see from that, and we'll talk about data analysis next week, exactly what the key things are people really want to talk about in your community. And as I always say, we don't want to talk with people about stuff that they don't want to talk about. So using this tool, there's a lot of good things that come out of it, but you can diagnose the temperature of your community and you can create a baseline understanding from scratch. Relatively easy, very open-handed. If you wanted to, you could create a paper survey, something similar that allows people to answer similar questions for people that find it harder to get online, and publicize that they can pick them up, say, in your local post office or wherever. But the good thing about diagnosis is it starts your journey. It's relatively easy to set up. It gets you a whole host of really high quality data, in particular the map-based stuff. Doing it this way, asking really open questions at the beginning, it also gives you the opportunity to challenge or confirm your own convictions. So those of you who are leading local place plans, you're already well situated within the community. You probably have a good idea of what might come out of these engagement processes, but you're wanting to make sure that it's really open and transparent. But we can sometimes need to be challenged against our confirmation bias as to what people are actually talking about. So that's super helpful to do that. You get your place specific data, and it also importantly, you've got data to evidence why you are going to choose certain themes to focus on in the next step when you focus down. So people are maybe going to say, well, you've created some engagement sessions to talk about specific topics, but why have you chosen them? And you've got a data set to justify it. So at this stage, simple and open, not complex questions. The responses, I guarantee you, they will add complexity. You're crowdsourcing insight from local experts. But just try and avoid asking leading questions right at the beginning. So once you've done all that, you're starting to get a really good idea of the things that people want to say. Now, it could be that that's about as much resource as you've got. And I would say that's quite a lot of evidence to start working on a local place plan. I think most people would also like to set up some kind of face-to-face conversations. So that's why we're here just now. Why develop an engagement strategy? So it makes your job easy. Developing a strategy behind all of this. Why would we do that? Well, first of all, it makes your job easier. It can help you realize that how to take advantage of existing gatherings in the community and seasonal events. So why set up a public gathering where you have to organize everything and market it when you could just rock up at a gala day with a stall and everyone comes to you? Makes total sense. You can minimize consultation fatigue. So you can pattern, if you're aware of other stuff going on, you can pattern your dates and times around that. If having a strategy means that you've thought through how to ensure that you've made opportunities to connect differently with folks that are unlikely to attend your events. So we'll come to that in a minute. You can weave in creativity to make events attractive and fun because you've thought in advance about what you want to do. And you can structure the moments of engagement to avoid or take advantage of school holidays and national sports event. You don't necessarily want to set up an engagement event on the same day that Scotland's going to win potentially the Six Nations or whatever. And then by thinking about a strategy in advance, you can also work to second guess your own group's own assumptions about who's available and when. So if you don't have maybe a mum whose kids are in the local primary school on your steering group, you might not think about the need to meet her, or give her an opportunity to speak to you or to connect that isn't about in the evening. She's taking care of her kids, or a dad, obviously. So you can take the opportunity to think, well, who is not represented on our group and how might we reach them, and be a bit strategic about it. It enables you to focus energy in the right places, and it enables you to explain to people if they say, well, why didn't you do this or connect with this person? You just say, well, this is what we tried to do with the resources we had. And then the big question is, okay, well, what does a good engagement strategy look like? So this is our little matrix that we use to help us figure through, well, what are the different opportunities and to stretch our thinking. And we use this every time we develop an engagement strategy for a community. So we've got 4 boxes, 2 axes, and we're going to go from box 1 round to box 4 as I explain this. So you can see that the 2 axes are go to them and come to us on the vertical axis, and informal and formal on the horizontal axis. And a formal context allows for greater collaboration because you can structure how people might talk to one another. And inviting people to come to us allows you to have more structure in the meeting. And in the informal context that probably allow for greater intimacy and more relaxation. And if we decide on contexts where we go to people's own safe place, it can make people feel safer. So box 1 in the bottom right-hand corner, these are usually the sort of context that we immediately think about we need to have engagement oriented around. They're formal, come to us contexts where we set the agenda, we invite people to a venue, we put out marketing, hopefully lots of different people come to us and from different backgrounds, and then we sit down and have conversations. So that could be an online conversation using Zoom or in public hall, or it could be an environmental festival, or maybe you could run a walkabout with a group of people, but it's quite formal. it gives us the opportunity to structure things the way we want to and get the data that we really want. Next, the other option is an informal come to us context. So we maybe we use food or music to attract people, like have a barbecue. It might be in an open space in your community during the summer. It might be that you have drop-ins in a local cafe that people are coming in anyway. So these are informal contexts where people are coming to us. Third, informal go to them context. So it could be that we can cross the barrier rather than expecting folk to come to us. We go to them, we go to local businesses at lunch hour, sports events, gala days, chat to people at the school gates. We're walking the dog and we chat with dog walkers around about, or we maybe do phone interviews. These are safe places where people are already gathering. They're pretty informal and chilled. And we can connect with folk that wouldn't otherwise come to us or feel confident to. And then last of all, box 4, go to them, but a bit more formal. So these are places where there's already existing formal structures like a youth group or a church meeting or parents association, or even going door to door, or the classic is a local school. So the kids are already a captive audience and we turn up with the permission of the teachers and we ask them. So, but it's quite a formal context, but we're going to them. So these are all options that you could choose to think about as you develop a strategy. And I always like to say a good strategy might have at least one from each of these types of boxes, if you can manage it. So I'm just going to pause there, a little bit of a thinking time. So just take 1 or 2 minutes just now for you in your own context, thinking of these 4 options for connecting with people. Can you think of one option that might work in your particular place for each one of these categories? So grab a pen and paper or just have a think. Option 1, 2, 3, and 4. What would you do in your place to tick off one of those boxes? A couple of minutes just to gather our thoughts and have a think. Great. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody. So I'm just going to come into land now. So like consultation fatigue and how do we connect with folk at the edges? Okay, I basically want to say, look, I get asked this question a lot, and my basic answer is relationship and passion. Okay, if your community feels a bit overwhelmed with consultation fatigue, honestly, the only thing that really is going to make, for me, in my experience, your passion and personal relationship and time and care will open people up. And secondly, this is a quote that I wrote for Planning Aid Scotland's dedicated speed training, which is a course that you can take. If you go to Planning Aid Scotland, they can give you some dedicated training about how to do community engagement. And they've got 8 criteria, one of which is inclusion. I wrote this as an explainer for this. Making sure people can be involved and feel involved in a way that works for them is not primarily a problem to be solved or a technique to be employed, but a relationship to be bridged. This requires time, effort, and humility. There's no other way about it. Top tip, if you know that there's a group in your community that you're uncertain about how to connect with them, don't sit around a table scratching your head trying to figure it out or grab a technique off of some website. Just go to them. If you've got the time, go and ask them what would work for you. Let them guide you. I know, I have to keep repeating myself that it's not rocket science in that sense. So just draw on their gifts, find out from them what might work for you. Young people like in this photo, just go and ask one of them. So the next thing is, so we've done our diagnosis, we've got a strategy, some tips for running focus sessions. So first of all, these wherever you're doing, these are probably going to be the more formal side of the quadrant. So set up different contexts for a roundtable group interaction focused on key themes. So you want to try and create the option for people to sit around tables like in this photo, maybe 6 to 8 people around a table, ask some good open questions. The benefit is to allow all these different perspectives to interact, people to go away with a different understanding of why other people's perspective on their place might be important. And then have a facilitator, if you can, and you've got the volunteers, someone just to facilitate and make sure the conversation doesn't go off track. And maybe someone else just to sit and write down what everyone says, because it's a bit tricky to both run a conversation and write stuff down. So if you've got the bodies, that can be really helpful. Then asking open questions to get more detailed information that you think you need. So for any particular theme that you've narrowed down as being particularly critical, you're already going to know some of the issues that really need to be focused on. So just try and look at having a set of good questions, open, but maybe focusing in on the issues that you need to address. Like for housing, well, where would housing maybe go? What types of housing do we need? What ideas do we have if there are developer contributions that might come in through future development for how to spend those? And this is where I find the Place Standard particularly helpful. The Place Standard is a tool, it's free to use, developed by the Scottish Government, some structured questions. If I'm honest, I don't tend to use all 14 questions. It's quite a long time to take people through them. But if I've got a theme that I want to focus on, I go to the Place Standard tool, just Google that and have a look. There's 14 categories, one of which is housing, for example, and then there's a host of sample questions that you can use there to go deeper. And instead of going through all 14 in one session, you just focus on a particular theme for your session as required by your community. And then very briefly, how do you feel about facilitating a conversation at a table? Top tip, if you're not talking as a facilitator, that's probably a good sign. So if you are ever facilitating at a table, try the very toppest tip is to reserve your own comments from coming into the group. But then it can be a bit daunting sometimes because you never know who you're going to get turning up. You could get a group that's really quiet. You could get a group that's really loud. You could get one person who's got a really dominant voice. You could get people potentially getting angry at each other. So what we try to, when we run these sessions, we start from the front and we lay down some guidelines, one of which is we expect you to be kind to each other. And what that means is if you get people to buy into some guidelines at the beginning, you can call them back to that on individual tables if you need to. But then we've got these 6 phrases for successful facilitation that I came up with when I'd be training people in facilitation, just to know what to do in any particular moment that's tricky. So number one is, it could be that the conversation is sticking or participants are giving closed responses. They're just sort of kind of saying yes or no, or not really elaborating. So as a facilitator, you simply ask, could you just say a bit more about that? Gently ask them to open up. Sometimes participants could go off-piste on a completely different topic. So this is where I would have a little sheet of paper that I call a parking chart, and I'd say, well, thank you for that valuable contribution. That's not what we're talking about tonight, but please write it down here for us to consider later. You could also say something a little bit more confrontational in a way, but as gently as you can. You could say to them, can you help me understand how what you've just shared relates to the topic at hand in this discussion? And you repeat what the focus is for the session. And they will go, well, they might self-check and just go, oh, actually, that's something different. I'll talk to you later about it. Next issue can be if someone's being just too dominant and talking over everybody or hogging the ground. So what you can say here is, thank you for sharing. We want to encourage a diversity of views to come forward today. Does anyone else have any differing or even opposing views? So what you're doing is you're gently saying, not you, just open up everyone else to that. That's a really good one. If not everyone's contributing, so if half the table talking, other half aren't, you could say something like, we want to hear from everyone in the room tonight. Does anyone who has not yet spoken want to contribute? And that gently doesn't focus on one person, but it generally closes down the folks who have talked a lot and allows people to consider whether they want to add something. If people get a bit heated, just remind them about the group ground rules. The nuclear option, if it really gets intense, which it shouldn't do, it's almost never happened to me, but if it does really get intense, just call a coffee break. Say, right, we're going to have tea and coffee now. and then get those two aside and get them to just explain to them that they can't really do that and help them lose some of their steam. And then when you want to bring things to a close, you've maybe got 5 minutes left in the session. Final words, you can say, we are coming to the end. So I'm going to go around and ask everyone in turn if they have anything final to contribute. You can say no if you want to. So just last of all, you'll be able to get this slide on the PDF that we send rounds and on the video, but it's just a reminder of what we have to do to evidence statement of community support. And so to do what we need to do when we go for validation, we need to describe the consultation activities we've undertaken, an estimate of the number of interests of the people, organisations involved, and a brief summary of what views were expressed, supporting or disagreeing. So at every session, remember to capture the dates, attendees, and a number of comments that are made, particularly if you're doing an online survey. Take some photos, ask people if that's okay, and then consider when you go out to your information notice period, as we talked about last week, if you do go wide to the community again to get their input, just consider putting all those comments in, whether they disagree or not with what your position is. But remember, good engagement is just listening well to interesting people about stuff that matters. And I'll stop there.